While most car builders chase polish, prestige, and perfection, Steve Darnell did something entirely different. He burned all that to the ground. In a world of chrome and clean lines, he embraced rust, skulls, and diesel-fueled chaos. He didn't just bend metal, he bent expectations. And from a back-alley Las Vegas garage, he forged an empire out of raw steel and rebellion. You may know him as the mastermind behind Vegas Rat Rods, the Discovery Channel hit that brought rat rod culture into the mainstream. But Steve's story goes deeper than TV could ever capture. Long before the cameras, before the fame, before Welder Up became a pilgrimage site for hot rod misfits, Steve Darnell was just a welder with a vision that no one understood. He built monsters from the bones of forgotten machines, scavenging scrap yards, cutting up old diesels, and turning junk into something that roared. While other builders were polishing chrome and chasing paint perfection, Steve was welding with fire, smoke, and soul. His builds weren't safe. They were savage, unapologetic, sometimes terrifying, always unforgettable. And that's exactly what made him dangerous to the establishment. But somewhere between the raw beginnings and the rat rod revolution, something shifted. The show that made him famous, it vanished. No farewell, no official finale, just silence. Fans started asking, what happened to Steve Darnell? Why did the king of chaos disappear from the screen? This is more than a story about custom cars. This is the story of a man who didn't just build vehicles. He built an identity, one forged in diesel smoke, shaped by rebellion, and hardened by everything the TV world couldn't handle. Because Steve Darnell didn't just reject perfection, he redefined what greatness looked like, in rust. Before the cameras, before the tourists, before Vegas Rat Rods was even a rumor, Steve Darnell was welding in the shadows of Las Vegas, alone, unknown, and completely obsessed. He didn't come from money. There were no sponsorships, no flashy connections, just a man, a torch, and a gut instinct that told him he didn't belong in anyone else's system. Las Vegas, with its glitz and artifice, was the perfect backdrop for a man building machines that spit in the face of polish and perfection. While the Strip lit up the skyline, Steve was in a dim garage, grinding rust off forgotten steel and turning it into something that could rumble down the road like a rolling apocalypse. Trained as a welder and fabricator, Steve wasn't just skilled, he was different. Where others saw limitations, he saw freedom. He didn't care what the blueprint said. He didn't care about resale value. He cared about impact. Every weld was brutal, every cut intentional. He wasn't building for the showroom. He was building for the soul. And what he created was more than custom. It was art, but not the kind you hang on walls. The kind that growls, spits flames, and roars down the street in a cloud of black smoke. Those early days weren't easy. Jobs were scarce. Clients didn't always get his vision. But Steve didn't stop. He kept welding, kept fabricating, kept building machines that scared people a little. And that was the point. Because in a world full of clean lines and quiet engines, Steve Darnell was already carving out his place. In fire. What Steve Darnell did next would shake the foundations of custom car culture and ignite a movement. Most people in the custom car world play it safe. They restore, they preserve, they chrome and clear coat. But Steve, he ripped those rules to shreds and built something no one had ever seen before. Brutal, diesel-powered beasts that looked like they'd been resurrected from a post-apocalyptic scrapyard. He didn't invent the term rat rod, but he redefined it. His style wasn't just dirty, it was intentional chaos. Steel panels stitched together like Frankenstein's monster. Weld scars left visible on purpose. Tractor parts bolted to hot rod frames. He added skulls, horns, spikes, chains. Every inch of these machines told a story. Some were terrifying. Others were hilarious. All of them were unforgettable. And under all that madness, engineering that worked. These weren't just showpieces, they ran hard. One of Steve's signatures was the use of diesel engines in cars that were never meant to handle that kind of torque. He loved the rawness, the sound, the smell. Where others saw limitations, Steve saw a challenge. He threw turbochargers into relics from the 1940s. He dropped massive diesels into rusted-out trucks, added hand-built suspension, and tuned them until they screamed across the Nevada desert like mechanical beasts. Every build was personal, raw, loud, alive. The clean, boring world of high-end customs didn't know what to do with him. But fans? They couldn't look away. And soon, neither could TV. By the time Discovery Channel reached out, Steve Darnell wasn't chasing fame. Fame came chasing him. His builds had gained a cult following. The photos went viral. The diesel smoke, the skulls, the fire. It didn't look like anything else on the road. People were flying into Vegas just to see his shop, Welder Up, in person. That's when the producers came calling. And in 2014, Vegas Rat Rods was born. The show wasn't just another car series, it was a shock to the system. Gone were the polished garages and scripted rebuilds. This was raw, unfiltered madness. Every episode was a metal symphony of sparks, roaring engines, and creative chaos. Steve wasn't just a builder. He was a frontman in a rock band made of grinders and torches. The show introduced his crew, a ragtag group of welders, mechanics, fabricators, and artists. No one wore matching shirts. No one smiled for the cameras. They worked like dogs, argued like family, and built like visionaries. But behind the scenes, the pressure started to build. Deadlines got tighter. Concepts got bigger. And the producers started poking at something Steve never wanted: drama. They wanted fights, fake deadlines, manufactured tension. But Steve wasn't an actor. He didn't play games. He just wanted to build. And that resistance started to cause friction. Still, the show delivered. Ratings soared. The audience loved it. Finally, a car show that didn't care about polish, just passion. But in the back of his mind, Steve knew TV doesn't care about vision. It cares about control. And he wasn't about to let anyone take that from him. For a while, Vegas Rat Rods was everything fans didn't know they needed: chaos, creativity, and cars that looked like they'd been built at the end of the world. At the center of it all was Steve Darnell. Black bandana, mirrored shades, tattoos sleeved across arms that never stopped moving. The show took off. Viewers couldn't get enough of the diesel-fueled nightmares rolling out of Welder Up. Steve's builds became legends. Low-slung trucks with vertical exhausts, hearse-like hot rods with flamethrowers, apocalyptic drag cars stitched together from wrecks and rust. It was automotive anarchy, and it worked. But TV doesn't care about soul. It cares about schedules. And soon, the pressure started eating away at the freedom that made Welder Up what it was. Each episode came with tighter deadlines. The builds got more ambitious. The pressure from producers became constant. More cuts, more rewrites, more story arcs that didn't exist in the real garage. The chaos on screen started to feel like a performance, one that didn't match the real chaos Steve thrived in. Behind the scenes, the battle lines were drawn. Steve wanted authenticity. The network wanted TV. And in the middle of that war, something broke. Steve could see it. In his crew. In himself. The builds were still wild, still powerful, but the spark, the real spark, was flickering. What began as a showcase of true grit was starting to look like every other reality show. And if there's one thing Steve Darnell was never going to become, it was just another guy playing a part on TV. Then, one day, it was just gone. No warning, no announcement. Vegas Rat Rods aired its final episode, and then silence. No dramatic farewell, no reunion special, no social media statements, just a blank screen where the most chaotic show on car TV used to live. And Steve Darnell? He vanished too. No interviews, no press tour, no goodbye post. He didn't explain. He didn't promote a comeback. He didn't tease a new network deal. He walked. Fans were confused. Forums lit up. What happened? Did the network pull the plug? Did Steve quit? Was there a fallout? Some said Discovery wanted to water the show down. Others claimed Steve refused to let producers script the builds. Some insiders whispered about contracts that got ugly. Creative rights, ownership, image control. But none of it came from Steve himself. The man who roared onto screens like a diesel-charged renegade, simply disconnected. And in some ways, that silence said more than any statement could. Because maybe the real reason Vegas Rat Rods ended was that it stopped being about the builds and started being about the ratings. Maybe Steve saw it coming. Maybe he knew it was time to get out before they turned Welder Up into just another backdrop. The empire wasn't gone. It just pulled the curtains closed. And Steve Darnell? He wasn't done building. He was just done building for cameras. After Vegas Rat Rods disappeared from the airwaves, fans feared the worst. That Steve had burned out, shut down Welder Up, or walked away from the garage forever. But they were wrong, because while the show ended, the real work never stopped. Welder Up remained alive and busier than ever. Tucked into a grimy corner of Las Vegas, the shop became something even more powerful than a TV set. It became a destination. Tourists, fans, and die-hard gearheads made pilgrimages to see the machines up close. The builds that defied convention, that scared HOA committees, that made neighbors call the cops for disturbing the peace. And Steve? He never left the shop. He just stopped letting the cameras in. Without the pressure of production schedules, he returned to what he loved most: diesel-powered insanity, off-the-wall engineering, and creativity with zero limitations. He began taking on private builds, not to impress producers, but to impress himself. Trucks, dragsters, steampunk Frankenbuilds no one else would dare to try. Every one of them carried the same DNA: fire, grit, and rebellion. He still wore the bandana, still rocked the shades, but now his builds were louder, weirder, more experimental. No episode scripts, no forced tension, just metal, fire, and vision. And for those lucky enough to walk into Welder Up today, they'll tell you, Steve didn't vanish. He evolved. And the Outlaw builder didn't slow down. He unleashed. Even after the cameras stopped rolling, Steve Darnell kept showing up, just not where fans expected. While TV drifted into reruns, Steve's image became something more than just that guy from Vegas Rat Rods. He became a symbol of rebellion, grit, and unapologetic authenticity. The bandana, the aviators, the sleeved tattoos, the diesel-plumed creations, they weren't branding tools. They were real. And in the world of overproduced, influencer-fed car content, Steve's silence became deafening. It made him bigger. more myth than man. Without discovery shaping the narrative, Steve took his identity back and expanded it. He started popping up in music videos, metal festivals, underground car expos. He collaborated with horror brands, punk designers, tattoo artists, and custom bike builders. He wasn't just in the garage anymore, he was in the culture. His rat rods weren't just vehicles, they were moving art pieces. One looked like a post-apocalyptic hearse, another a war rig that could have rolled straight out of Mad Max. But it wasn't for show. These builds ran loud, violent, diesel-throated, and fans could see them up close, because Welder Up transformed into a cross between a working garage, a showroom, and a museum of controlled chaos. People lined up to take photos with the vehicles, buy merch, and, if they were lucky, catch a glimpse of Steve himself. He wasn't hiding. He was just doing things on his terms. And as the dust settled from his departure from TV, one thing became clear. Steve Darnell didn't need a camera to stay relevant. His presence was more powerful than any episode ever aired. Fans still ask, will Steve Darnell ever return to television? The short answer, probably not. Because Steve has been vocal, at least in interviews and public appearances, about why he stepped away from the spotlight. His issue was never with building, or even with the fans. His issue was with the editing, the forced drama, the way producers tried to shape chaos into something digestible for prime time. For someone who built an empire out of rejecting conformity, being told how to act, what to say, or how to build for better story arcs was never going to fly. That kind of control? That wasn't creative freedom, it was compromise. And compromise is something Steve Darnell never welded into his DNA. He's expressed it plainly. He'd rather build for one customer who gets it than perform for a million who don't. He's not interested in fake rivalries, countdown timers, or staged arguments over oil leaks. What matters to him now is real work, mentoring young builders, experimenting with wild concepts, and turning rat rods into rolling statements. That doesn't mean he's disappeared. He just changed lanes. Today, he teaches, he inspires, he creates when he feels like it. And when he's not under the hood, he's investing in the next generation of welders and gearheads, people who still believe that what you build means more than how many views it gets. And that's the real twist in the story. Steve Darnell could have been a mainstream celebrity. Instead, he became a legend. Steve Darnell never wanted the throne. He didn't care about being the best or the biggest. He never asked for titles or trophies. All he wanted was to build, with fire, with freedom, and without rules. And somehow, in doing just that, he built a kingdom anyway. A kingdom of steel, skulls, soot, and soul. A kingdom where every weld tells a story, every dent has character, and every machine looks like it survived the apocalypse and won. He didn't polish it. He didn't fake it. He lived it. Welder Up still stands today, not as a monument to fame, but as a temple to what happens when you refuse to play by the rules. This isn't the kind of story where the hero fades into nostalgia. Steve is still building, still shaping metal into monsters, still showing people what it means to create without compromise. He walked away from the spotlight, but he never walked away from the work. And maybe that's the point. Steve Darnell wasn't made for television. He was made for the grind, the heat, the grind of gears and grit of life. And in a world obsessed with perfection, his empire, built on scrap, rust, and raw rebellion, proves one thing. Sometimes, the most legendary creations come from the junk pile. Because when others saw junk, Steve Darnell saw fire.